Mara Voss was reading a story about a rabbit who wanted to visit the stars when the sky turned orange. Not sunset orange. Fire orange. The light poured through the classroom windows and painted 26 small faces in the color of something ending. They stayed cross-legged on the carpet, still waiting, because children always needed one extra second to understand when the world had broken. Mara stopped mid-sentence. Outside, dark shapes dropped through the clouds in perfect lines. They were not meteors. Meteors did not slow, turn, or release smaller black craft toward farms, streets, and homes like teeth spilling from a jaw. The floor trembled. A little girl screamed. A boy barely 5 years old grabbed Mara's chair leg. "Miss Voss," he whispered. Mara closed the book slowly. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it, but her mouth did what terror and duty forced it to do. It smiled. That was the first rule when you worked with children. You never showed them the thing coming for them. "All right, everyone," she said. "We're going to play the hiding game. Remember the hiding game?" Outside, something exploded beyond the playground. The windows flashed white. Crayons rolled off a table and scattered across the floor. Mara did not look back. Everyone stays together. Everyone stays quiet. We go to the safe room and we wait until I say the game is over. They nodded because she asked them like it mattered. Haven's Reach had never been built for war. It was a frontier colony for families who wanted soil, clean air, and simple lives. It had farms, 2 schools, a few towns, and an orphanage where children without parents were given warm beds and names spoken gently. It had no real army. Only a militia of 100 volunteers with old rifles and the courage of people defending homes nobody important had bothered to mark. The Vraxian Dominion came anyway. Commander Reckon Joel watched the colony burn from the bridge of his assault carrier. He was tall even for a Vraxian, gray-skinned and plated, shaped by ambition into something more weapon than officer. Haven's Reach was exactly the target he had waited years to receive. Small, soft, profitable. No orbital defense. No hardened garrison. Mineral deposits under the hills. Civilians ready for labor classification. A clean raid. A promotion-shaped raid. "Status," Joel said. "Militia resistance is collapsing," his second officer replied. "Surface control within the hour. Collection teams are entering settlements." "How many captives?" "Projected final count, 2,000. Joel nodded. 2,000 labor units from a single operation. High Command would approve. He did not ask how many were old. He did not ask how many were injured. He did not ask how many were children. Numbers had no faces and reports were cleaner without faces. On the surface, Vraxian soldiers moved with brutal efficiency. Doors were blown inward. Parents were dragged from kitchens. Farmers were stunned in burning fields. Anyone who resisted was bound and loaded into metal transports where names stopped mattering. At the school, the main doors were locked. The squad leader placed a charge and stepped back. The blast punched through the hallway. Every child in the safe room flinched against Mara's legs. She stood before the smoke cleared. Arms spread. Body shaking. Voice steady. "There are only children in here," she said. "They are young. They are not workers. Please, leave them." The Vraxian stared until his translator finished. Then he pushed her aside. Mara hit the wall hard enough to lose the air in her chest. For 1 second, the corridor tilted, and she saw the rabbit book lying open on the classroom floor, its painted stars glowing under orange light. Then the safe room door opened. Small screams filled the hall. Soldiers pulled children out under their arms like supplies. Mara forced herself up. She did not fight. Fighting would get her killed before she could do anything useful. So she followed. If they took the children, they would take her too. By sunset, Haven's Reach was smoke and ash. 2014 people had been loaded onto Vraxian transports. 317 were children. The youngest was 3. The oldest was 14. In Joel's official report, they were all entered under one clean line. 2014 labor units. Standard classification. No school. No orphanage. No children. In the cold hold of the transport ship, Mara gathered as many small bodies around her as her arms could reach. The metal floor vibrated beneath them. The air smelled of oil, fear, and alien engines carrying them away from everything they knew. A little girl pressed her face into Mara's sleeve. "Are we going to die?" she asked. Mara pulled her closer. "No," she said. "Listen to me." Her voice was the only warm thing in the room. "Once upon a time," Mara whispered, "there was a rabbit who wanted to visit the stars." The children leaned in. Above them, Joel opened a bottle of Vraxian victory wine. He did not know that below his feet, wrapped around 317 stolen children, was a fuse, and it was already burning. The survivors of Haven's Reach did not have time to bury anyone. They ran into the hills while the colony burned behind them, carrying broken weapons, wounded friends, and the kind of silence that comes after screaming has done nothing useful. By nightfall, only 31 of them had reached the ridge above the eastern valley. 31 out of a colony that had still been laughing over breakfast. A militia engineer named Tomas Hale dragged the damaged communication unit behind him with both hands. One side of his face was burned. His left arm hung wrong. Every few steps he slipped in the mud and got back up because the black transports were already climbing toward orbit. Someone had to tell Earth. Someone had to say the words. They assembled the transmitter under a sky still flickering with fire. The antenna was bent. The power cell was cracked. The targeting lens had been shattered during the first strike. It should not have worked. Tomas hit it with a rock until the relay light turned green. Then he looked at the others. Nobody spoke. Not because they had no message. Because the only message left was too terrible to say. A woman with blood down her cheek stepped forward. Her daughter had been in Mara Voss's classroom that morning. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to hold the transmitter with both palms. She pressed the emergency key. The signal launched broken, weak, and full of static. Most of it died before it left atmosphere. But 3 words survived. They took children. The survivors stood in the cold wind and watched the signal climb beyond the burning clouds. Nobody cheered. Nobody prayed. They only stared upward because every human on that ridge knew exactly what those words meant once they reached home. The message crossed the dark between stars. Relay to relay. Station to station. A wounded whisper moving faster than grief could follow. At 3:17 Earth Standard Time, the signal reached the nearest human relay station. The operator on duty was a young woman named Elian Marr. She had expected a quiet shift. Border traffic. Cargo schedules. Routine colonial status pings. Then Haven's reach came through her speakers like a ghost. Static. Breathing. Fire distortion. And then the words. They took children. Elian listened once. Then again. On the second playback, her hand moved without permission to the emergency escalation panel. She did not ask whether the report was complete. She did not wait for a supervisor. Some messages were not judged by length. They were judged by what they broke inside the person hearing them. Within minutes, military intelligence had the transmission. Within an hour, Haven's Reach's dead communication grid confirmed the attack. By dawn, the report sat on the desk of every flag officer in United Human Command. The UHC had not been activated in 60 years. Most civilians thought of it as history. A relic from the first brutal century of expansion, when humanity had learned that space did not reward innocence. It was not a normal military body. It was a buried command structure designed for one purpose only. When humanity could not afford to argue, it stopped being many nations. It became one species. At 9 o'clock Earth Standard Time, every human channel in known space carried the same coded phrase. Military bands. Civilian networks. Personal devices. Shipyard speakers. School emergency systems. Hospital walls. Mining colony alarms. 4 words reached every human at once. They took our children. The response was not gradual. There were no debates first. No committees. No public arguments about cost, jurisdiction, or escalation. On Earth, retired soldiers arrived at recruitment centers before the lights were on. Some wore old uniforms that no longer fit. Some carried canes. Some had medals buried in drawers for wars they never discussed. None of them asked what the pay was. On Mars, 3 shipbuilding corporations turned over their entire production capacity before the UHC requested it. Their joint statement was 6 words long. Tell us what you need built. On the colony worlds, governors who had spent decades fighting over taxes, borders, water rights, and trade lanes signed emergency unity orders within the hour. Even the criminal underworld changed shape. Smugglers, black market navigators, and illegal relay runners began transmitting hidden routes through Vraxian space. Secret fuel caches. Blind sensor lanes. Dominion supply points. They asked for nothing. Not amnesty. Not money. Not forgiveness. Only coordinates for where to send more. Across human space, factories roared awake. Mothballed ships were pulled from orbital graveyards. Sealed weapons vaults opened for the first time in generations. Old treaties received notifications, not requests. The galaxy watched and slowly understood the mistake it had made. Humanity had not become gentle because it forgot violence. Humanity had become gentle because it had caged violence. And somewhere in Vraxian space, 317 children were sitting in the dark. So the cage opened. General Thag Vaughn had not lost a war in 219 years. That was not pride. It was mathematics. He stood inside the command hall of Citadel COR, an asteroid station buried deep in Vraxian-controlled space, and watched an empire move across holographic maps. Fleets shifted. Supply chains pulsed. Conquered systems blinked in obedient red. Everything flowed through this room. Everything flowed through him. Vaughn was old enough that the gray armor plates of his skin had darkened almost black. 3 of his 4 eyes had faded pale with age, but the 4th still burned sharp enough to make junior officers lower their gaze. He did not enjoy cruelty. He did not enjoy mercy. He enjoyed results. War, to Vaughn, was a calculation. Measure the enemy. Identify cost. Apply pressure where resistance was weakest. Emotion was noise. Rage was waste. Victory belonged to the side that stayed cold the longest. That morning, Haven's Reach appeared on his reports as one line. Resource seizure successful. 2014 labor units captured. No significant Vraxian losses. Vaughn marked it satisfactory and moved on. Then his intelligence officer approached. Talik was thin, nervous, and too careful with his hands. "General," he said. "Something unusual." Vaughn looked up. He disliked that word. Unusual meant the universe had done something without asking permission. "Explain." Talik placed a tablet on the desk. "The humans have gone silent." Vaughn waited. "All diplomatic channels," Talik continued. "All trade communications. All ambassadorial traffic. Their envoys have recalled themselves from Concord space. Their civilian relays are active, but carrying no normal traffic." "When did this begin?" "Approximately 16 hours ago. All at once." Vaughn stared at the data. In 2 centuries he had seen civilizations panic, bluff, bargain, beg, threaten, and collapse. He had never seen an entire species go quiet. Quiet was not surrender. Quiet was energy being moved somewhere words could not reach. Which recent operation involved human territory? Talik checked, though he already knew the answer. Only Commander Joel's raid on Haven's Reach. Vaughn reopened the report. Small colony. Light resistance. Standard capture operation. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that explained silence spreading across human space like a shadow. So Vaughn did something he rarely did. He called Counselor Iden. Iden was not Vraxian. He was Felchian, one of a conquered species kept alive in Dominion service because knowledge was sometimes more useful than obedience. He had soft blue skin, large dark eyes, and the weary posture of someone who had spent decades warning predators about fire. He entered slowly and bowed. "The humans have gone silent," Vaughn said. "Tell me why." Iden asked to see the report. He read Joel's summary once. Then again. Then he requested the full captive manifest. As the list opened, his fingers began to tremble. Vaughn noticed immediately. He had studied fear in prisoners, allies, enemies, and officers. This was not discomfort. It was not concern. This was fear reaching the bone. "Speak," Vaughn ordered. Iden's voice came out almost too soft to hear. "The captives from the school and child care facility. How old were they?" Vaughn checked the incomplete data. Age is not listed. Facility type suggests young. 4 to 14 standard years. Iden closed his eyes. For a long moment he did not breathe. "How many?" 317. Iden set the tablet down with extreme care, as if sudden movement might detonate it. "General," he said, "you need to understand what a child is to a human." Vaughn's face hardened. "Every species protects its young. Basic biology." "No," Iden said. "You are not listening." The command hall quieted around them. Humans do not merely protect children because instinct tells them to. They built their entire moral structure around them. Their laws, their wars, their myths, their grief, their mercy, their rage. A human child does not need to belong to them. It only needs to be a child. Vaughn said nothing. Iden's trembling worsened. "I studied them for 40 years. They argue over everything. Borders, faith, wealth, history, blood. They will split themselves into factions over a word." He looked directly at Vaughn. "But touch their children from the outside and the arguments stop." Officers nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Iden continued, quieter now. "A human will die for a child they have never met. A human will kill for a child whose name they do not know. It is not weakness. It is not sentiment. It is the one line they made sacred before they ever reached the stars." Vaughn leaned forward. "What will they do?" Iden swallowed. "They will come for those children with every ship, every soldier, every hidden weapon they promised the galaxy they would never use again. They will not negotiate. They will not accept payment. They will not stop because cost means nothing after that line is crossed." The great hall seemed suddenly too large. Vaughn looked down at Joel's report. 2014 labor units. Such a clean phrase. Such a stupid phrase. For the first time in 219 years, General Vaughn faltered. "Get me Commander Joel," he said. Then lower, almost to himself. and begin fortifying every position between here and human space. Commander reckoned Joel did not understand why the general sounded afraid. That was the first problem. The second was that he mistook fear for weakness. He stood on the bridge of his assault carrier, watching labor manifests scroll across the main display, and felt nothing but irritation when General Vaughn's secure channel cut through his victory reports. "Return the children immediately," Vaughn said. Joel blinked all four eyes in slow contempt. "The captives are being processed." "I said return the children." Joel glanced at his officers. Some looked down. Others pretended to study their panels. They all knew the order had come from the highest military authority in the forward campaign. That should have mattered. Joel's ambition was louder. "With respect, General, the captives are mine to manage. They were taken under my command. I distributed them across 3 labor facilities for efficiency." Vaughn's face on the screen did not move. "You distributed children?" "Small labor units," Joel corrected. "Less productive immediately, yes, but useful long-term. Also valuable as leverage if the humans attempt retaliation." For several seconds Vaughn said nothing. Joel took that silence as hesitation. "The humans are emotional," he continued. "That makes them predictable. If they want their stock returned, they can negotiate favorable terms." Vaughn's voice dropped. "You do not understand what you have done." Joel almost smiled. "I understand perfectly. I captured a colony with minimal losses." The channel ended. No warning. No debate. Just Vaughn's face disappearing from the screen. Joel stood very still, embarrassed more than concerned. Then he ordered the bridge crew to continue processing transfers and prepare defensive readiness reports, because men like him always believed consequences were something that happened to other commanders. On Citadel Sur, Vaughn remained alone in his private chamber after the call ended. He replayed Joel's words once. Small labor units. Useful as leverage. Negotiate. Vaughn had conquered worlds with officers who were cruel. He had used arrogant commanders, brutal commanders, cowardly commanders, and clever ones. War had room for many kinds of failure if they still produced results. But stupidity during a crisis was different. Stupidity could kill empires faster than enemy fire. By the end of the hour, Vaughn had issued orders across the forward campaign. 40 war fleets were pulled into defensive formation. Orbital guns powered up around major stations. Minefields were armed. Sensor nets widened. Supply convoys were rerouted behind hard shields. He built a wall of metal and fire between human space and the 3 facilities holding the captives. It was the largest Vraxian defensive concentration in a generation. Thousands of ships. Millions of soldiers. An entire sector turned into a clenched fist. His officers moved with disciplined speed, but Vaughn saw the questions in their posture. Why this much? Why now? Why for one frontier raid? He gave them no speech. Fear spread faster when given language. 5 days passed. No human delegation arrived. No threats came. No ransom demand. No diplomatic outrage. Only silence. That was what disturbed Vaughn most. Anger had edges. You could measure it. You could provoke it, redirect it, exhaust it. Silence had depth. On the 6th day the first jump point opened. Then another. Then 10. Then the sector lit like sparks thrown from a furnace. Human ships arrived from every direction at once. Not a fleet. Fleets. Capital vessels emerged in stacked formations, their hulls dark against the starfield. Battleships the size of small cities. Carriers with flight decks stretching for kilometers. Fast attack ships moving so tightly they looked less like machines than muscle fibers around a bone. The Vraxian tactical display filled with blue, then kept filling. Talik's voice shook as he read the count. 3,000 capital-class vessels. More jump points opened. 5,000. More blue. 7,000. Vaughn did not move. 9,000 capital-class vessels confirmed. Support craft beyond reliable count. The command hall went quiet. Vraxian intelligence had estimated humanity's active capital fleet at under 3,000. They had been wrong by a factor of 3. And still the humans did not speak. No speeches. No insults. No declaration of war. Then one message broadcast across every frequency, in every known language from every human vessel at once. Return our children. You have 1 solar cycle. The message repeated. Again. 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 No emotion in the voice. That made it worse. Joel received the same message aboard his carrier and laughed in front of his officers. He sent back a negotiation proposal. Terms for prisoner release. Resource concessions. Recognition of Vraxian extraction rights on Haven's Reach. Safe passage guarantees for Dominion assets. He thought he had opened bargaining. The humans gave no reply. The solar cycle ended. On the tactical display at Citadel Sior, 9,000 blue markers began moving at the same time. Vaughn watched the wall he had built and understood, too late, that walls only worked against enemies trying to stop. The humans were not trying to stop. They were coming through. The battle for the Vraxian defensive line lasted less than anyone expected. That was the first humiliation. The second was that the humans did not fight it like a battle. They fought it like a lock. Every Vraxian officer had prepared for a frontal assault. 40 war fleets waited in layered formation, shields overlapping, weapons pre-charged, minefields suspended between them like invisible teeth. Orbital guns tracked the human advance. Command ships sat protected behind walls of destroyers and heavy carriers. It was a formation built to stop conquest. The humans had not come to conquer. At the exact second the solar cycle expired, the human fleet split apart. Not chaotically. Precisely. Long-range strike ships fired first, but not at the largest targets. Their weapons bypassed hulls and engines and punched directly into communication relays, sensor towers, flag bridges, and command uplinks. In 4 minutes, 60% of the Vraxian line lost central coordination. In 6, entire battle groups were receiving orders too late to act on them. In 8, ships that had trained together for decades were turning into each other's firing lanes because the battlefield had stopped speaking one language. Vaughn watched from Citadel Sior and felt the first piece of the calculation fail. The humans were not destroying his fleet. They were removing its ability to decide. Then the spearheads appeared. 3 human assault formations broke from the main advance, each one aimed at a different labor facility where the captive children had been taken. The rest of the fleet wrapped around them like a moving shield, absorbing fire, jamming targeting systems, and cutting open gaps that lasted only seconds. The spearheads never slowed. Vraxian cruisers tried to block the first formation. The humans went through them. Not around. Through. Their weapons struck engines, shields, weapon cores, and navigation systems with surgical cruelty. Vraxian ships went dark, spinning helplessly, alive but useless. Escape pods launched. Hulls vented atmosphere. Bridge crews screamed into dead channels. The humans were not killing unless forced. That made the advance more terrifying. They were not enraged animals. They were engineers clearing debris. One Vraxian captain ordered a suicide ram against the second spearhead. His ship accelerated, engines burning white, crew chanting Old Dominion war hymns over internal speakers. A human frigate changed course by 3 degrees. One shot. The cruiser's engines died. The ship drifted past the spearhead, untouched except for the exact part that made it dangerous. The hymns stopped. Across the line, surrender lights began blinking on Vraxian ships that still had weapons loaded and armor intact. Not because they could not fight. Because they understood they were irrelevant. They were not the target. They were the hallway. The humans were walking through. On the third spearhead, a carrier group took direct fire from 3 Vraxian battleships. Its forward shields collapsed. Fire rolled across its outer hull. For a moment, Vaughn thought the formation would break. Instead, 2 human battleships moved in front of the damaged carrier without waiting for orders. They placed their own bodies between the fire and the rescue path. Behind them, medical transports continued forward. That was when Vaughn understood the true shape of the operation. Every weapon, every ship, every formation, every sacrifice had been arranged around one objective. Reach the children. Nothing else mattered. Not territory. Not vengeance. Not glory. Reach the children. A report from the front line appeared on Vaughn's display. Human boarding teams had breached Facility 1. Facility 2 had lost external defense power. Facility 3 was surrounded. Vraxian guards were surrendering before contact. Joel still refused to yield. His last recorded transmission demanded that the humans halt or risk harm to the captives. The message never reached the fleet. A human cyber warfare unit killed his transmission inside the relay before the second sentence completed. Then his carrier lost engines. Then shields. Then internal security. Then gravity. Vaughn opened a direct channel to the human command vessel. Vice Admiral Jonah Keene appeared on the screen. Gray-haired. Thin. Come. He looked less like a conqueror than a tired man waiting for a door to open. General Vaughn, Keene said. Vaughn chose his words carefully. I am authorizing the immediate release of every human captive. I will provide all facility locations and order Dominion forces to stand down. In exchange, I ask that you cease your advance. Keene looked at him for one silent second. Commander Joel was given 1 solar cycle. I am overriding Joel's authority. We are no longer asking, General. The channel closed. Vaughn stood in the command hall while the greatest military force he had ever assembled came apart piece by piece. Not destroyed. Dismantled. He looked at the blue spearheads cutting toward the facilities and understood the war had ended before the first human ship arrived. It ended when Joel's soldiers opened that classroom door. The facility on Seor 4 had never been built for children. It had been built to process labor. Gray walls. Gray floors. Gray doors. Air that tasted recycled too many times. Lights that flickered without rhythm. A place designed so no one inside could forget they had become property. Mara Voss had been there 8 days. Her left eye was bruised purple from a guard's fist. Her hands were raw from cold metal. Her voice had grown rough from speaking when she wanted to collapse. But every morning when the lights snapped on, she stood. That mattered. If she stood, the children looked up. If the children looked up, they remembered there was still an adult in the room. So Mara stood. She had turned the holding area into the smallest school in human space. Morning was for stories. Midday was for rest. Afternoon was for lessons scratched into the floor with broken plastic. Evenings were for songs, whispered first, then stronger when the younger ones stopped crying. 14-year-old Kai handled water. 12-year-old Priya watched the smallest children during sleep. 13-year-old Davi counted everyone each morning. He walked the room carefully, lips moving, touching shoulders when children shifted. Every morning he reached the same number. 317. Nobody lost. Nobody taken. Nobody left behind. That was the number Mara carried in her chest like a heartbeat. On the 8th night, she was sitting against the wall with a little boy asleep against her leg when the floor trembled. Not the normal machine vibration. Something deeper. Controlled. Distant. The children woke one by one. A crack echoed through the facility. Then another. Then a muffled boom that pushed dust from the ceiling. Some of the younger ones began to sob. Mara forced herself up. Middle of the room, she said. Everyone together. Older children, hands on the little ones. Her voice nearly broke. She did not let it. The lights flickered. Outside the holding area, alien alarms screamed. Then came silence. Long. Heavy. Impossible. Then a human voice spoke beyond the door. Clear through a helmet speaker. Facility secure. Moving to holding area. All teams, weapons down near the children. Repeat, weapons down near the children. Mara stopped breathing. The children stared at her. She did not say they had come. She could not trust her voice enough. A white line of heat appeared in the metal door. It traced a rectangle slowly, cleanly, almost gently. Then the slab fell inward with a crash that made the children flinch backward. Figures stood beyond it in dark armor. Human armor. They entered fast, but every weapon pointed at the floor. One by one they spread along the walls, making themselves barriers instead of threats. The lead soldier removed his helmet. He was young, maybe 30. Brown skin. Scar across his jaw. Eyes tired in the way only soldiers' eyes became tired. He looked at the room. At the children. At Mara. Something moved across his face before he locked it down. My name is Sergeant Ron Cole, he said. United Human Command. We are here to take you home. Nobody moved. For one frozen moment, rescue felt too big to understand. Then a little girl stepped forward. She was 4, maybe 5. One of the quiet ones. She had barely spoken since the transport. She looked up at Cole. Miss Voss said you would come. Cole knelt. He had breached an armed alien facility on an airless moon. He had walked through fire, vacuum locks, and hostile corridors. Now his hands shook. Miss Voss was right, he said. The room broke. Children ran into armored soldiers' arms. Operators knelt, lifted them, wrapped blankets around shoulders, checked faces, whispered names they had only just learned. Some cried behind their helmets. No one mocked them. There was nothing weak about weeping after finding children alive. A medic reached Mara and touched her shoulder. Ma'am, are you hurt? Mara shook her head. Count them, she said. The medic blinked. Ma'am? The children. Count them. Please. The extraction team obeyed. It took minutes because children were hugging soldiers, asking questions, crying, laughing, clinging. But Davi helped. Kai helped. Priya helped. Finally, the number came back. 317. All of them. Mara sat down on the cold floor and covered her face. For 8 days she had not allowed herself to break. Now the children were safe. So she did. Commander Reckonjoel was not found on his bridge. He was not found leading a counterattack. He was not found beside his soldiers, defending the operation he had been so proud to command. He was found inside a supply closet at Facility 2, crouched behind emergency ration crates with a sidearm in his shaking hand. He did not fire it. When human operators opened the door, he dropped the weapon before anyone asked. For a moment, Sergeant Cole only looked at him. Joel looked smaller without his bridge, without his screens, without his reports calling stolen people labor units. He looked like what he had always been beneath the uniform. A coward who had mistaken helplessness for victory. Cole's finger rested near his trigger. Then he lowered the rifle. "Bind him," he said. Not because Joel deserved restraint. Because the children were watching. The rescue ended with brutal speed and careful hands. Human transports landed on the airless moon in tight formation. Medics moved through the children with blankets, water, oxygen checks, warm food, and voices kept deliberately soft. Every soldier had been briefed on the same order. No shouting near the children. No weapons raised near the children. No Vraxian prisoners moved through the children's line of sight. The war outside could wait. Inside those transports, the only mission was to make small hands stop shaking. Mara refused evacuation until the last child had boarded. No one argued. By then, every soldier on CR4 knew who she was. The teacher who had followed the children into captivity. The woman who had taken blows instead of stepping aside. The woman who had built a classroom inside a prison because she refused to let the Vraxians turn children into stock. When she finally stepped into the transport, the children made space for her without being told. Not as a passenger. As home. General Vaughn watched the extraction feed from Citadel COR. He saw human medics kneeling on the floor to speak at eye level. He saw armored soldiers carrying sleeping toddlers like glass. He saw one operator remove his gloves before wrapping a blanket around a child's shoulders, as if metal fingers were too cold for something that had already suffered enough. Vaughn had spent 2 centuries measuring strength by territory taken, fleets broken, cities forced open. Now he watched another kind. The kind that could cross a sector with 9,000 capital ships and still remember to kneel. He turned to his officers. "Order all forward forces to stand down." One officer stiffened. "General, the defensive line still has operational capacity. We can regroup around Citadel." "No." The word cut through the command hall. Vaughn's fourth eye fixed on him. "We lost 6 days ago. We simply did not know it yet." The surrender order went out across the sector. Ships powered down. Orbital guns went cold. Minefields were deactivated under human supervision. 17 conquered systems were handed over for review, occupation, and prisoner recovery. The Vraxian forward campaign collapsed without one final heroic charge. There was no glory in it. Only arithmetic finally catching up with arrogance. 4 months later, Joel stood before a human military tribunal. The trial was public. The evidence was clean. The school. The orphanage. The manifests. The transmission. The holding facilities. The 317 children. Many humans wanted execution. Some demanded it openly. Families of Haven's Reach sat in the gallery with faces carved hollow by grief, and no one blamed them for wanting blood. But the tribunal did not give them blood. It gave them law. Joel was sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal station, with no command, no rank, no title, and no name spoken with honor again. He looked confused when the sentence was read. Perhaps he expected humans to become monsters once rage gave them permission. They did not. That was the part the galaxy struggled to understand. Humanity had unleashed fleets hidden for generations, cut through the Dominion's strongest line, broken a campaign, and crossed enemy territory with enough force to erase worlds. Then, when the man responsible stood helpless before them, they did not butcher him. Not because they lacked fury. Because fury was not in command. The children were alive. That had always been the mission. Everything else was only the cost of reaching them. General Thake Vaughn surrendered the entire forward campaign. Not one station. Not one fleet. Everything. 17 conquered systems. 40 war fleets. Hundreds of facilities. Supply bases, prison yards, weapons depots, mining worlds, listening posts, and command stations that had taken the Dominion decades to build. He handed them over because he understood something his high command did not. The humans had come for 317 children. And they had brought enough power to end an empire. The formal surrender was broadcast across the galaxy from the Great Hall of Citadel Core. Vaughn stood alone beneath the black banners of the Dominion, old armor plates dull under the lights, his fourth eye no longer burning with command but with exhaustion. The Vraxian High Command watched from their seats above him. They expected excuses. They expected blame. They expected a general trying to preserve his name. Vaughn gave them none of that. "I have fought the Draenari and broken them," he said. "I have fought the Mok'al and conquered them. I have waged war against 17 species across 2 centuries, and I have never once faltered." The hall remained silent. Vaughn looked up at the council. "I faltered against the humans." No one moved. Not because their ships were better, although they were. Not because their fleet was larger, although it was. Not because their weapons were superior, although they carried weapons we did not know existed. He paused. "I faltered because I watched an entire species become a single weapon in less than 30 days. The council chamber seemed to shrink around the words. Every faction, every colony, every shipyard, every soldier, every engineer, every criminal network, every civilian hand that could build, carry, guide, repair, or fight. They moved as one. Vaughn's voice lowered. They did not argue. They did not negotiate with themselves. They did not hesitate. They heard that their children had been taken, and every other division inside their civilization became irrelevant. He let that sit. Then he said the sentence that ended his career. We are fortunate they only wanted them back. The oldest counselor leaned forward. You fear them. Vaughn looked at him without shame. Yes. A ripple moved through the chamber. Vaughn did not blink. I looked into the eyes of their vice admiral. I saw a man capable of burning this dominion to ash and sleeping peacefully afterward. Not because he was cruel. Because he had decided our existence was less important than 317 small lives. No one answered. Do not fight the humans, Vaughn said. Not because you cannot hurt them. You can. Not because they cannot bleed. They can. Do not fight them because you do not understand the cost. He stepped away from the podium. None of us did. Now I do. Vaughn never commanded another fleet. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Concord revised its official guidelines on humanity. The emergency session lasted 4 hours, and most of those hours were spent in silence while delegates watched footage from Haven's Reach, the mobilization, the battle, and the rescue. At the end, one line was added beneath the section marked Human Diplomatic Boundaries. It was short. Every species memorized it. Do not touch the children. 6 months later, Haven's Reach had new homes, new farms, and a new school with wide windows facing the rebuilt playground. A permanent human garrison orbited above the planet, a ring of warships that never left. Mara Voss returned to her classroom. Not all the children returned. Some families moved away because some rooms hold memories even after the walls are replaced. But most came back. They sat cross-legged on the new carpet, quieter than before, older behind the eyes, but still watching her with trust. Mara picked up a book from the shelf. Her fingers paused on the cover. Then she opened it. Once upon a time, she said, there was a rabbit who wanted to visit the stars. Outside, high above the clouds, a human warship passed silently through orbit. Its weapons were armed. Its sensors were active. Its crew was watching. Mara did not look up. She did not need to. She knew they were there. They would always be there.